of that out of the way, I think it's time to open up and take a little bit of movie news.
What?
What?
All right, let's talk about some of the few things that have dropped yesterday and today. There's a few interesting things going on. First and foremost, where's my browser? There's my browser. Our first little bit of movie news comes to us from Deadline. And this particular article is all about how I'm sure everybody remembers a few years ago there was a hashtag going around about Oscars so white. Hashtag Oscars so white. And everybody has been wanting to know what the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts, and Sciences was going to do about it. The Academy Board was primarily made up of straight white males for eons, and that was the one demographic that got to choose what films were eligible for Best Picture and, blah, 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 all the other categories. Not only what was eligible, but what films would win, ultimately. And that has been extremely problematic over the years, especially what happened about 5 years ago with hashtag Oscar So White, is that it really pointed out how unbalanced this process was. And so yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, September 8th, yesterday, the Oscars officially announced that they are changing the standards for eligibility so far, currently just for Best Picture. Any other film, or rather all other films, are still going to be eligible for, Best Director and, cinematography and writing and adapted screenplay and all that stuff. But I just kind of like to scroll down here for a minute. So if you will bear with me, let's jump over to the webpage. Here we go. These are the new guidelines that are going to be coming out. There's 4 different standards, as they're calling them: Standard A, Standard B, Standard C, Standard D. And they're going to be rolling out a new standard for each Oscars 1 year after the next. So by 2025, all 4 standards will be in effect. This upcoming Oscars, that will not be in effect just yet, but it will apply to the 2022 season. So Standard A, I'm not going to go through all of this stuff because, there's quite a bit of information here, but just to kind of give you an overview. Standard A, in order to qualify for Standard A, there's 3 different categories: lead or significant supporting actors, general ensemble cast, and main storyline or subject matter. In order to qualify for Standard A, you need to your film has to be able to check mark or checkbox off any one of these 3 categories, which is at least one of your lead actors or significant supporting actors in an underrepresented racial or ethnic group must be from the following category: either Asian, Hispanic, Latinx, Black, African American, Indigenous, Native American, Alaskan Native, Middle Eastern, North African, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, or any other underrepresented race or ethnicity. The same thing goes for women, racial or ethnic groups, LGBTQ groups, people with cognitive or physical disabilities, or who are deaf or hard of hearing. And this, it kind of goes on and on and on. Are you going to cast your lead actors or significant supporting actors in this way? What's your general ensemble cast looking like? Or what is the main storyline or subject matter about in your film? And then, Standard B, pretty much the same stuff, but in different aspects of filmmaking. Standard C is, same thing, but in terms of paid apprenticeships or internship opportunities, training opportunities. And then a Standard D is the same thing, but in terms of marketing, publicity, and distribution. Guys, there is a lot to unpack here. Cordy, had you heard about this yet? And if you have or if you haven't, what's your initial knee-jerk reaction? Because I'll share my knee-jerk reactions in a moment, but how do you feel about the Oscars changing eligibility requirements to be eligible for Best Picture?
So I heard something of this nature was coming. I haven't had a chance to read the details yet. My big thing is around directors. as a rule, behind the scenes, though, the high-powered
Mm-hmm.
roles, you do get like a massive gender imbalance.
Yes.
With direction, it's particularly bad, and it's something that Equity New Zealand, which is the New Zealand Screen Actors Union, has been big
Sure.
about, like trying to support producers and directors. So I would be super keen to see like. Are they going to reward films for having a diverse production team, for example? Because that would be really interesting. And yeah, I wear another hat as a union person in the tech sector. So anyone working in, again, post-production roles or kind of the many kind of IT focused roles that increasingly go towards making up a major movie motion picture. Again, diversity in those work environments is also really cool and awesome. Really love that the interns part is in there.
Right?
Really love that like there are many ways to fulfill the criteria potentially, like both include terms of including people with disabilities, great. Maybe different sexualities or sexual identities, also great. Yeah, this is really fascinating. I can't wait to see how it plays out.
I agree.
I'm just kind of excited about it. I think it could mean that some scripts decide to go ahead because when they're being put forward for consideration and they look a bit diverse and a bit niche, that will be seen as an advantage, not necessarily a hard sell.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very
Now,
interesting.
my knee-jerk reaction to this was like when I first saw the article last night and I was reading through it, my knee-jerk reaction was, okay, like in principle, I'm all for this. But what about films like 1917? What about films like Ford v Ferrari? Or a few years ago, oh shoot, Francis McDormand, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Well, maybe a little less so, Three Billboards, but last year, 1917, which I personally thought was deserving of Best Picture. I really thought that should have taken Best Picture last year. My knee-jerk reaction, now granted, after I slept on it, I'm revealing my cards here, but last night I had a very different reaction from what I have today, this morning, or this afternoon, as the case may be. So my knee-jerk reaction last night was, but there's like really great stories and really great films. Like if you've seen 1917, it's all about these two English officers in the Great War, which was we now call World War One, going through the English countryside looking for this one particular soldier to give him information, and it just so happened to be the central soldier's brother. So he's out looking for his brother. And they just go through the whole countryside and blah 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 whatever. Given the subject matter, given the race or ethnicity of the actors in that role in that time period, and in the way the story played out, and the people behind the camera as well, that movie by these guidelines would not have qualified for the Oscars. So that was my knee-jerk reaction, is that we could potentially see like really great films not be able to qualify for Best Picture. But then I slept on it, and this morning I started thinking like, well, yeah, and it doesn't prohibit films like that from still being made. Sure, go ahead, go off and continue to make whatever film strikes your heart and makes you feel like you can be inspired by the story or whatever. But by putting these new guidelines in terms of what can qualify for Best Picture, it becomes more inclusive and more diverse and gives other people more opportunities. But also, on a grander scale, it is the social consciousness that is kind of evolving. Like, do we even want, in let's say 5 years from now, 5 years from now in 2025, when all of these new guidelines are put into effect for Best Picture, are those like the 1917s? Are those the kinds of movies that we as a social collective are going to point at and say, "Meh, that's the movie that I wanted to win Best Picture"? I argue no. I would argue that we are evolving as people. We are learning how to be more inclusive and involved in other people's lives. I don't know, Cordy. Do you see it differently, or do you think that I have a leg to stand on in this regard?
find it quite funny that you had a quibble about a historical movie because, yeah, I'm a historical reenactor, and uh, the history is full of black people. So whether that is Eastern France in the early 1900s, early 20th century, there would not just be white people there. There's plenty of potential for an interesting homosexual love story in the trenches in World War One. In fact, there are a great many wonderful gay poets who died in those trenches. There are just so many ways that you can think about that story and think about that setting beyond the sort of stereotypical idea of some tweedy English people wandering around a field or whatever. So I think maybe it'll challenge us to write our histories better and to represent our histories in the actual true colourful way that reflects the times.
I
So
I think
yes.
those are wonderful points, things that I never stopped to consider as well before. That's I mean, and that's what this is all about. Let's create this community. Let's have these discussions. Let's move forward and see what other untapped resources that we have, you know? But the question is, guys, what do you think about the new guidelines that the Oscars is shaping up for? Do you agree that, this is a direction that we need to be moving in as a social collective? Or do you have other thoughts or opinions? Is there something that we're leaving out that we haven't stopped to consider before? Or are we bang on the money and yes, we need to wake up and kind of like, let's explore unexplored territory. What do you think? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Okay, guys.